Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Before we start, I need to warn you, what you're about to hear is real. These aren't made-up scary stories. These are actual accounts from people who went to Alaska for vacation, and, well, let's just say, not all of them came back the same. Tonight, we have 8 true stories about missing tourists in Alaska. We're talking about regular people, a waitress, a teacher, a nurse, just everyday folks who saved up their money for a dream vacation. They booked nice cabins, planned fishing trips, signed up for photography tours. Everything looked perfect online. 5-star reviews, beautiful pictures, friendly hosts. But here's the thing about Alaska. It's huge, it's isolated, and once you're out there in the wilderness, you're completely alone. No cell phone signal, no help for miles. And sometimes, the people offering to help you aren't really trying to help at all. Some of these tourists escaped and lived to tell their story. Others weren't so lucky, and a few of them. They're still out there right now, but they're not human anymore. So, if you're ready to hear what's really happening in Alaska's remote areas, then stay with me. But I'm warning you, after tonight, you'll never trust an online review again. Let's begin. My name is Emma Chen, and I've been a waitress for 8 years. Started when I was 18 at a Greasy Spoon diner in downtown Seattle, worked my way up to fine dining, then back to comfort food when I realized I actually preferred the honest work and real conversations. I've served everyone from billionaire tech bros to homeless veterans, handled kitchen fires, violent drunks, and health inspectors having bad days. But what happened last summer on Highway 3 Inches, Alaska changed everything I thought I knew about small towns and the people who never leave them. Actually, let me be honest about why I'm telling this story. My name isn't really Emma Chen anymore. I had to change it after what I discovered, after what I escaped. The Alaska State Police have my real testimony, but they can't do anything about Millerville. Officially, it doesn't exist on any current maps. I'd been saving every tip and overtime dollar for 6 months to afford my dream Alaska road trip, finally scraped together enough for gas, camping gear, and 2 weeks of freedom. What I didn't know was that I was driving straight into a hunting ground that's been operating for over 30 years. Day 5. Somewhere between Fairbanks and nowhere, my engine started making this grinding noise. The kind that means expensive repairs. I'd had the car checked before leaving Seattle, but later I'd learned that Tom's Automotive had been calling Seattle mechanics for years, paying them to sabotage tourist vehicles before long trips. The nearest town, according to my GPS, was Millerville, population 89. What my GPS didn't show was that those 89 people hadn't changed in decades. Not because people don't leave, because people don't survive leaving. Millerville looked perfect. Too perfect. Like a movie set waiting for tourists to arrive. Every building freshly painted, every lawn perfectly maintained, every person I passed waving like they'd been expecting me specifically. Tom's Automotive was right where it should be. Tom himself came out wiping his hands on a rag that I now know wasn't stained with motor oil. He looked about 60 with kind eyes that I later learned had watched dozens of people like me disappear forever. "Engine trouble?" he asked, and I swear I heard satisfaction in his voice. Tom popped the hood and made a show of listening to the engine. "Timing belt's shot. Lucky you made it this far without the engine seizing. I can fix it, but I'll need to order parts from Anchorage." What he didn't mention was that he'd disabled my timing belt the night before. They'd been tracking my car since I'd gotten gas in Fairbanks, where Tom's nephew works at the last station before the deep wilderness. 3, maybe 4 days, Tom said, watching my face carefully. Sarah at the diner was maybe 50, with grandmother hands that had helped bury more bodies than I want to think about. The room she offered me upstairs came with a lock that only worked from the outside. I didn't notice until my second night, when I heard it click shut after I'd gone to bed. "We look after travelers here," Sarah said, and now I know she meant it literally. They look after us until we're no longer useful. By day 3, I was noticing things. The same 89 people, always doing the same routines. Bill at the general store had the exact same conversations with everyone who came in. Mrs. Henderson swept her porch at precisely 2 p.m. every day, always waving at the exact same moment when people walked by. Like they were all following a script. When Tom called to say the parts would be delayed, I asked to see his phone to call my boss in Seattle. He handed it over with that same kind smile, but I noticed he dialed a number that went straight to a recording. A fake employer line they'd set up to make tourists think they'd successfully contacted the outside world. That's when I started paying attention to the details that didn't fit. The library had newspapers, but nothing dated after 1995. The post office had mail slots for residents, but I never saw any mail truck arrive or leave. The general store sold camping supplies, but every item looked like it had been sitting on the shelf for years, dust carefully cleaned off before tourists arrived. And the photos, God, the photos. Sarah's house was full of pictures of previous residents. Young people, mostly women traveling alone, all smiling in the same locations around town. All wearing clothes that looked decades out of date. When I asked about them, Sarah got that distant look and said they'd all moved on to find their paths. I counted 47 different faces in those photos. All tourists who'd stayed in Millerville. All gone without a trace. The night I tried to leave, I discovered the truth about Millerville's hospitality. My car was in Tom's garage with the engine completely torn apart. Not repaired, systematically destroyed. When I confronted him, he dropped the friendly act entirely. "You're not going anywhere, Emma," he said, and his voice was flat, mechanical. "None of you ever do." That's when I saw the workshop behind the garage. Tools that weren't for fixing cars, plastic sheeting, lime, industrial bone saws, and photos pinned to a board. Dozens of tourist driver's license photos with dates written underneath. The most recent was from 2 weeks ago. A girl named Jennifer from Colorado. I ran back to the diner and found Sarah waiting for me with that same grandmother smile. "Now, Emma, you're just going to upset yourself thinking too hard about things," she said. "Why don't you come upstairs and get some rest? Tomorrow we'll talk about your permanent position here." The lock clicked from outside again, but this time I was ready. I'd been palming dinner knives for 2 days, and the old window frame was rotted enough to pry open if you knew where to push. I got out through the window and ran for the tree line behind Main Street. That's where I found the real horror. The cemetery wasn't marked on any map, but it was there. Rows and rows of fresh graves with no headstones. Just numbered metal stakes driven into the ground. I counted over 300 stakes before I stopped looking. 300 tourists who'd had car trouble in Millerville over the years. I heard dogs barking in the distance. They were coming after me. Here's what I learned during my 3 days hiding in the wilderness before I reached the highway. Millerville operates like a hunting preserve. The town exists solely to trap tourists traveling alone. They identify vulnerable targets at gas stations and sabotage vehicles just enough to reach their town. Once you're there, you never leave. The residents are all complicit. Some are original founders from the 1962nd who started this as a way to rob tourists but discovered murder was more profitable. Others are the few tourists who agreed to participate rather than die. The newest residents do the welcoming and integration work because they're most believable to new arrivals. They sell everything: cars, belongings, identities. Tourist disappearances in remote Alaska are so common that most families give up searching after a few months. The state police are understaffed and overwhelmed. Bodies decompose quickly in the wilderness. Perfect crime repeated hundreds of times. When I finally reached the highway and flagged down a trucker, he told me something that made my blood freeze. He'd been driving Alaska routes for 20 years and had dropped off dozens of stranded tourists in Millerville. Young people traveling alone, mostly. Always grateful for the ride to the nearest town. "Nice folks there," he said. "Always take good care of people having car trouble." I filed a report with Alaska State Police. They investigated and found nothing. No town called Millerville on Highway 3. No Tom's Automotive. No businesses registered to that location. But I know the truth. The town is still there, just not on official maps anymore. They moved it after my escape, set up somewhere new, with a different name. The same 89 people, the same script, the same cemetery, filling up with tourists who just wanted to see authentic Alaska. I'm telling this story because I found something else when I researched missing tourist cases. Every year, dozens of young people disappear on remote Alaska highways. Solo travelers whose cars are found abandoned with mysterious mechanical failures. Families get told their kids probably got lost in the wilderness or fell through ice, but I've seen the pattern. Missing persons reports filed from Fairbanks, where tourists were last seen getting gas. Cars found abandoned exactly 43 miles south on Highway 3, right where the unmarked road to Millerville branches off. Jennifer Morrison from last year? The college student whose parents hired private investigators? Her car was found in that exact spot. Timing belt failure, just like mine was supposed to be. Marcus Rivera, the motorcycle rider from 2 summers ago? Same location. Same mechanical issue. Rebecca Walsh with the toddler who disappeared 3 months ago? Her car was found there too. Police reports say she probably walked into the wilderness and got lost. But I know she walked into a town full of people who were very, very happy to help her with childcare. The most disturbing part isn't the murders. It's how good they are at being the people you need them to be. They study you while you're trapped there, learn your weaknesses, your dreams, what you're running from. Then they become the solution to all your problems, right up until the moment you realize the solution is death. I still have nightmares about Sarah's smile, about how genuinely happy she seemed when she talked about me staying permanently. The way they made me feel like I belonged somewhere for the first time in my life, right before they planned to bury me in an unmarked grave. If you're reading this and planning a solo trip through rural Alaska, please listen to me. Stay on main highways. Don't trust small towns that seem too perfect. Don't believe people who are too eager to help strangers. And if your car breaks down in a place that doesn't appear on GPS, start walking immediately and don't look back. The tourism industry doesn't want people to know about places like Millerville. Bad for business. But every year, more solo travelers disappear on those remote highways. More families never get answers about what happened to their kids. I got lucky because I'd spent years waitressing, reading people, noticing when something felt wrong. Most tourists don't have that experience. They trust the kindness of strangers because they want to believe people are fundamentally good. But in Millerville, that trust gets you buried in an unmarked grave with a numbered stake, and no one who remembers your real name. I changed my identity after I escaped because I know they're still looking for me. The one tourist who got away and can testify about what really happens in Alaska's missing tourist cases. Sometimes I get calls on my new phone number from area codes I don't recognize. When I answer, there's just silence, then a woman's voice asking if I'd like to visit Alaska again. It always sounds like Sarah. The investigations are still ongoing, but they'll never find enough evidence. The town moves, the names change, the script gets updated. But the cemetery keeps growing, one disappeared tourist at a time. So, if you're ever driving through Alaska and your car breaks down near a perfect little town full of people who are too happy to help, remember this story. Remember that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who look exactly like the help you need. And remember that some places aren't on the maps because they're not supposed to exist. My name is Sarah Chen, and I've been an elementary school teacher in Cincinnati, Ohio, for 8 years. I specialize in 3rd grade, and I've always prided myself on being the kind of teacher kids remember fondly. Patient, creative, someone who makes learning fun. I've handled everything from classroom disruptions to worried parents, budget cuts to standardized test pressure. But what happened during my vacation to Eagle Peak Lodge in Alaska completely changed how I see trust, isolation, and the dangerous naivety that comes with wanting to believe the best in people. If you're a solo traveler, especially a woman going through a life change, please listen to every word of what I'm about to tell you. The divorce was finalized in March, and by May, I was exhausted. Teaching 3rd graders requires constant energy, but dealing with David's lawyers, splitting our assets, and pretending everything was fine in front of my students had drained me completely. My principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, pulled me aside after school one day and said I looked like I needed a real break. "Sarah, you've been here every day for 2 years without calling in sick once. Take some time for yourself this summer." I'd been saving money in a separate account during the divorce proceedings. My emergency fund that became my freedom fund once the papers were signed. $2,000 felt like enough for a real vacation, something I'd never done alone before. David always chose our trips, usually crowded resorts where he could network with other insurance agents. I spent hours researching solo travel destinations for women. That's when I found the blog post about Eagle Peak Lodge, hidden gem for solo travelers seeking peace and nature. The photos showed a beautiful wooden lodge surrounded by mountains, private cabins, hiking trails, and most importantly, a section titled, "Solo Female Travelers Welcome. Your safety and comfort are our priority." The reviews were incredible. Women from all over the country talked about how healing their stays had been. Marcus, the owner, made me feel like family. Perfect for recovering from life changes. Exactly what I needed to rediscover myself. The price was reasonable, $150 per night including meals, and when I called, Marcus himself answered the phone. "Eagle Peak Lodge, this is Marcus speaking." His voice was warm and grandfatherly. When I explained I was recently divorced and looking for a peaceful solo retreat, he was incredibly understanding. "Sarah, I get a lot of ladies in your situation. This place has a way of helping folks heal. You just focus on taking care of yourself, and I'll make sure you have everything you need." I booked a week immediately. The drive from Anchorage was exactly what I needed. 3 hours of stunning mountain scenery with my phone playing my favorite music. No David criticizing my song choices, no obligations except to myself. When I pulled up to Eagle Peak Lodge, Marcus was waiting outside to greet me personally. He was about 50, medium build, with kind eyes and calloused hands that suggested real work experience. He helped carry my bags to my cabin without me even asking. "Built this place myself after my construction company sold," he said, pointing out various features. "My late wife Diana, she always dreamed of running a place where people could come heal in nature. Been doing this for 15 years now. My cabin was perfect, rustic but clean, with a stone fireplace, comfortable bed, and huge windows facing the mountains. Marcus had left fresh flowers on the table and homemade cookies with a welcome note. Breakfast is at 8 if you want company. Or I can bring a basket to your cabin if you prefer solitude. Hiking trails are all marked on this map. Emergency radio is by the door, though cell service is spotty up here. I check on all guests daily, but otherwise you won't see me unless you need something." For the first time in months, I felt truly relaxed. The first 3 days were exactly what my soul needed. I hiked gentle trails marked clearly with colored ribbons, read novels by the fireplace, and journaled about my future. Marcus brought fresh bread and fruit each morning, and we'd chat for a few minutes about the weather, local wildlife, or his stories about building the lodge. "Diana would have loved having you here," he said on the third morning. "She always said this place was meant for women who needed to rediscover their strength." His grief seemed genuine, and I found myself looking forward to our brief daily conversations. He felt like the grandfather I'd never had, protective but respectful, interested in my healing without being intrusive. On the fourth day, I called my school's main office and spoke to Mrs. Rodriguez. "Sarah, you sound better already. Take another week if you need it. We've got your substitution covered." When I told Marcus I wanted to extend my stay, his face lit up. "That's wonderful. Most people need at least 10 days to really decompress. I'll give you the extended stay rate, 20% off." By day 8, I felt like a different person. The knot in my shoulders was gone. I was sleeping through the night, and I'd started sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. Marcus had become like family, and when he knocked on my door that morning with an excited expression, I was curious. "Sarah, I know you've been enjoying the marked trails, but there's a special spot I only show to guests who've really connected with this place. It's about a 2-hour hike, but the view is absolutely unforgettable. Diana and I used to go there for anniversaries." The idea of seeing Marcus and Diana's special place felt like an honor. I packed water and snacks and met him at the trailhead behind the lodge. The trail started normally, well-maintained with the same colored ribbon markers I'd grown used to. Marcus was an excellent guide, pointing out wildlife tracks and edible plants. His knowledge of the area was impressive, and I felt completely safe following his lead. "You know, Sarah, in 15 years of running this lodge, I've only shared this spot with maybe a dozen guests. Has to feel right, you know?" After about an hour, I noticed the trail markers becoming less frequent. When I mentioned it, Marcus waved dismissively. "These old trails, the weather takes down markers sometimes. I know every inch of this mountain, been walking these paths since before I built the lodge. Another hour passed, and the trail became less defined. My phone showed no signal, which Marcus had warned me about. But something felt different. We were much deeper into wilderness than any of the marked trails had taken me. "Marcus, maybe we should turn back? This is farther than I usually hike." His response made me pause. "We're almost there, Sarah. Turning back now would waste the whole day. Trust me." There was something in his tone, less grandfatherly, more insistent. But I'd trusted him completely for over a week. Surely I was just tired and overthinking. The trail ended at a primitive log cabin, much smaller and older than the lodge buildings. This definitely wasn't a scenic viewpoint. "Here we are," Marcus said. "This is where you'll be staying for the extended program." "Extended program? Marcus, I don't understand." "Come inside, Sarah. Let me explain what happens next." Something was very wrong. The cabin was clearly prepared for occupation, sleeping bag, basic supplies, but also bars on the windows I hadn't noticed from outside. On a table near the door, I saw items that made my blood freeze. Driver's licenses from different states, women's jewelry, personal items that clearly belonged to previous lodge guests. "Marcus, whose things are these?" "Previous participants in the program. Women who decided they wanted to start completely over, away from their old lives and problems." I backed toward the door, but Marcus was blocking it. "You see, Sarah, sometimes people think they want to go back to their old lives after they've healed here. But what if there was a better option? What if you could stay here permanently, away from all those memories and disappointments?" "I want to go back to the lodge. Now. Can't do that. See, this cabin is where people learn whether they're really ready for a new life or whether they're too attached to their old problems." I looked around desperately. The cabin was positioned so that even if I ran, I'd be lost in Alaskan wilderness with no supplies, no navigation, no way to survive. "How many women, Marcus?" "6, including you. Some adapted better than others." The driver's license is on the table. I recognized one from a review I'd read online, Jennifer from Michigan, who'd written about how healing her stay had been. Except the date on her license was 3 years old. "Marcus, people will look for me. My school, my family. Solo, divorced women taking healing vacations. Sarah, you'd be amazed how often people just decide to start new lives somewhere else. Happens all the time." Over the next 3 weeks, I learned the horrible efficiency of Marcus's system. The cabin was positioned so escaping meant certain death from exposure and starvation. He controlled all food, water, and warmth. He visited daily to check my progress toward accepting my new life. "You can choose to embrace this opportunity, Sarah, or you can choose to suffer. Either way, your old life is over." I tried running once, during a snowstorm. I made it maybe half a mile before becoming completely lost and nearly dying from hypothermia. Marcus found me and brought me back, more dead than alive. "That was foolish, Sarah. I'm trying to help you, but you have to want to be helped." The worst part was how he genuinely seemed to believe he was doing something beneficial. In his mind, he was collecting women who were struggling and giving them a chance to start over by erasing their identities completely. Jennifer adapted beautifully for almost 2 years, really embraced the program. Unfortunately, she eventually became homesick and had to be retired. When I asked what retired meant, his expression told me everything I needed to know. As winter approached, Marcus explained that the cabin couldn't sustain multiple people through the harsh season. "You'll need to prove you're worth keeping, Sarah. Show me you understand the program by helping acquire next season's guests." When I refused to help him hurt other women, Marcus's demeanor changed completely. "Then you're choosing to leave the program. I don't force anyone to stay who doesn't want to be here." He stopped bringing adequate food and fuel for heat. The cabin became freezing, and I was slowly starving. "This is your choice, Sarah. You can choose to be part of something bigger, or you can choose to end your participation." I died on December 3rd, from a combination of hypothermia and starvation. Marcus documented everything in a journal he kept about his research into helping women transition away from their problematic lives. He disposed of my body somewhere in the wilderness where it would never be found. My personal belongings were added to his collection of successful program completions. When my family reported me missing, the investigation was thorough but ultimately futile. Marcus told police I'd checked out early, mentioning I was excited about starting fresh somewhere new. He had checkout documentation and seemed genuinely concerned about my whereabouts. Solo travelers change their minds all the time, he told investigators. Sarah seemed like she was really ready for a new chapter in her life. The investigation was eventually classified as an adult choosing to disappear voluntarily, surprisingly common for recently divorced women taking solo vacations. Eagle Peak Lodge continued receiving excellent online reviews. Marcus refined his targeting methods, getting better at identifying women who wouldn't be immediately missed, those going through divorces, job losses, family estrangements. My family hired private investigators, but Alaska's wilderness makes searching nearly impossible. They never found any trace of what actually happened to me. Marcus continues operating Eagle Peak Lodge today. Travel websites still recommend it as the perfect destination for solo women seeking healing and peace. He's expanded his program to include other remote properties throughout Alaska and has even begun helping other lodge owners develop similar services for troubled guests. If you're planning a solo vacation, especially to a remote location, please research more than just online reviews. Call references directly. Verify the owner's background through multiple sources. Tell multiple people your exact location and check-in schedule. And if something feels wrong, even if you can't explain why, trust that instinct immediately. Don't let politeness or the desire to trust override your survival instincts. That perfect, too good to be true, remote lodge with the caring, grandfatherly host might be the last place you ever see. My students will never know what really happened to their teacher who just wanted to heal from a difficult divorce. Trust me, some getaways you never come back from. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I've been working as an office manager for 15 years. Started right out of college at a small accounting firm in Phoenix, worked my way up through 3 different companies. I handle everything from scheduling meetings and managing budgets to dealing with difficult employees and keeping entire departments running smoothly. It's demanding work, constant deadlines, angry clients, staff drama, and executives who expect miracles on impossible timelines. But what happened 6 months ago, at what I thought was a wellness retreat in Alaska, changed everything I thought I knew about taking care of my mental health. Some healing programs aren't designed to heal you at all. By early spring this year, I was completely burned out. Panic attacks every morning before work, couldn't sleep without anxiety medication, and my doctor warned I was heading for a complete breakdown. "You need to get away from everything, Dr. Williams told me during what felt like my 100th stress-related appointment. Find somewhere quiet, no phones, no work emails. Your body is shutting down from chronic stress." That's when I found Aurora Healing Center online. Their website looked perfect. Meditation sessions, natural therapy, complete digital detox in the Alaska wilderness. The photos showed beautiful log cabins surrounded by pine trees, peaceful meditation spaces, and smiling people doing yoga by mountain lakes. Everything I needed to reset my mind and get my life back on track. The program cost $4,000 for 2 weeks, which was basically my entire savings account. But the reviews were incredible. Life-changing transformation. Breakthrough healing I never thought possible. Finally found peace after years of anxiety and depression. One review even said, "This place literally saved my life and gave me superpowers to handle stress." I called my boss and requested emergency medical leave. Booked the flight to Fairbanks the same day. The journey to Aurora Healing Center felt like traveling to another planet. First, a regular commercial flight to Fairbanks, then a small 6-seater plane that bounced through mountain passes for what felt like hours. No cell phone signal, no GPS, just endless wilderness stretching in every direction. The pilot, a quiet guy named Tom, didn't talk much except to point out landmarks I'd never see again. Aurora Healing Center looked exactly like the website photos, a cluster of beautiful log cabins connected by wooden walkways, surrounded by towering pine trees and mountain peaks. Solar panels on the roofs, a large central building with floor-to-ceiling windows, and meditation platforms scattered throughout the property. It felt like a luxury resort designed for people who needed to disappear from the world. Dr. Lisa Chen met me at the landing strip with a warm smile and firm handshake. Mid-40s, perfectly professional, wearing outdoor gear that looked expensive but practical. She had impressive credentials, licensed psychologist with specializations in trauma therapy and addiction recovery, published research on stress management, 15 years of clinical experience. Exactly the kind of expert I needed to fix whatever was wrong with my brain. "Welcome to your healing journey, Sarah," she said, helping carry my bags toward the main building. "We're going to take excellent care of you here. By the time you leave, you'll feel like a completely different person." The intake process was thorough but comfortable. Dr. Chen spent 3 hours reviewing my medical history, psychological background, stress triggers, and treatment goals. Blood work, heart rate monitoring, even a brain scan using some kind of portable equipment. "This helps us customize your treatment program for maximum effectiveness," she explained. "Everyone's brain chemistry is different, so we tailor everything specifically to your needs." 11 other participants had arrived that week, all dealing with similar issues: chronic stress, anxiety, depression, burnout. There was Marcus, a software engineer from Seattle who hadn't slept properly in 2 years. Jennifer, a nurse from Denver who'd started having panic attacks during surgeries. Robert, a teacher from Minneapolis who'd been drinking heavily to cope with classroom stress. Everyone seemed intelligent, professional, and desperate for relief. The daily schedule looked perfect. Morning meditation sessions overlooking the mountains, yoga classes in heated pavilions, one-on-one therapy with Dr. Chen, nature walks through the forest, organic meals prepared by an amazing chef named Miguel, evening group discussions where we shared breakthroughs and supported each other. No phones, no internet, no connection to the outside world except for weekly check-in calls with family. The first week was everything I'd hoped for. My anxiety started melting away during morning meditation. The panic attacks stopped completely. Dr. Chen's therapy sessions were incredibly effective. She had this way of asking questions that unlocked emotional blocks I didn't even know existed. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. "You're making exceptional progress," Dr. Chen told me after my 6th therapy session. "Your brain is responding beautifully to the treatment environment. I think you're ready for the next phase of your healing." That's when she introduced the supplements. These are natural compounds that enhance meditation effectiveness and accelerate therapy breakthroughs, she explained, handing me a bottle of small blue capsules. Herbal extracts that optimize brain chemistry for healing. Think of them as vitamins for your emotional recovery. The supplements looked professional, sealed bottles with scientific labels, ingredient lists that included things like standardized ashwagandha extract and pharmaceutical-grade omega-3 complexes. Dr. Chen showed me research papers about how these compounds improved meditation states and therapy outcomes. Within hours of taking the first dose, I felt incredible. Colors seemed more vivid during nature walks. Sounds were clearer and more detailed. My memory improved dramatically. I could recall childhood experiences with perfect clarity. Most importantly, the emotional breakthroughs in therapy became much more intense and productive. "The supplements are working perfectly," Dr. Chen said during my 2nd week evaluation. "Your brain scans show exactly the neurological changes we want to see. Enhanced focus, improved emotional regulation, optimized stress responses." She also introduced therapeutic sleep sessions. Special audio programming played through headphones while we slept. "This reinforces positive changes at the subconscious level," she explained. "Your brain continues healing even when you're unconscious." The sleep sessions were amazing. I'd wake up feeling completely refreshed, with insights and clarity about life problems that had bothered me for years. My energy levels were higher than they'd been since college. I felt stronger, sharper, more capable of handling anything life could throw at me. The other participants were experiencing similar transformations. Marcus was sleeping 8 hours straight for the first time in years. Jennifer felt confident and calm instead of constantly anxious. Robert had completely lost his desire to drink alcohol. We bonded over our shared breakthroughs, spending hours discussing how different we felt. "You're all responding exceptionally well to the advanced protocols," Dr. Chen announced during a group meeting. "I'm going to increase dosages and session intensity. You can handle more aggressive treatment now." The higher supplement doses produced even more dramatic effects. My physical strength improved noticeably. I could hike longer distances without getting tired. My thinking became incredibly sharp and analytical. I could process complex information faster than ever before. Even my vision seemed better. I could see details in the distance that had always been blurry. But I also started noticing something concerning. Without the supplements, I felt terrible. If I missed a dose or took it late, anxiety and depression came flooding back worse than before. My body seemed to need the compounds to function normally. That's perfectly normal during intensive treatment. Dr. Chen assured me when I mentioned this. Your brain chemistry is recalibrating. The supplements are supporting optimal neurotransmitter production. Think of them like medication for a chronic condition. She recommended extending my stay another 2 weeks for the integration phase. Stopping treatment too early could reverse all your progress, she warned. Your brain needs time to establish these positive changes permanently. The extended program included more intensive medical monitoring. Daily blood draws, brain scans, physical fitness testing, psychological evaluations. Dr. Chen said this ensured the treatments were working properly and safely. But I noticed the testing equipment looked more advanced than anything I'd seen in regular hospitals. Contact with the outside world became completely restricted. External stresses can interfere with the healing process. Dr. Chen explained when I asked about calling my family. You're at a critical phase where outside influences could destabilize your progress. That's when she introduced the experimental treatments. These are cutting-edge protocols that aren't publicly available yet, she said, showing me equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Electromagnetic brain stimulation, genetic optimization therapy, cellular enhancement procedures. You're responding so well to standard treatment that you're eligible for advanced options. I should have said no, should have demanded to leave immediately. But the supplements made everything seem logical and beneficial. My enhanced brain processing told me this was an incredible opportunity for improvement beyond normal human limits. The advanced treatments produced remarkable results. I lost 20 pounds while gaining muscle mass. My skin became perfectly clear and healthy. My cognitive abilities improved dramatically. I could read and understand complex scientific papers, solve mathematical problems I'd never learned, analyze situations with superhuman clarity. I felt like I was becoming an optimized version of myself. Stronger, smarter, more capable than any normal human being. That feeling lasted until I discovered what Aurora Healing Center really was. It happened during my 3rd week, when I couldn't sleep despite the therapeutic audio programming. I walked to the main building looking for water and found Dr. Chen working late in an office I'd never seen before. Through the window, I saw computer screens, displaying brain scans, genetic sequences, and chemical formulas. File cabinets labeled test subject data and enhancement protocol results. The door was unlocked. Inside, I found everything. Aurora Healing Center wasn't a wellness retreat. It was a pharmaceutical research facility conducting illegal human trials on experimental cognitive enhancement drugs. Dr. Chen wasn't just a therapist. She was a research scientist, developing compounds to create enhanced human beings for military applications. The supplements weren't herbal extracts. They were experimental drugs designed to permanently alter brain chemistry, genetics, and physical capabilities. The therapeutic sleep sessions were hypnotic programming to make subjects compliant and prevent resistance to treatment. Every participant was a test subject for different enhancement formulas. The defense contractors funding the research needed data on how the drugs affected various personality types and professional backgrounds. Wellness retreats provided perfect cover for recruiting volunteer test subjects who would pay for their own experimentation. File cabinets contained records of previous retreat sessions. Most participants suffered permanent neurological damage. Others died from organ failure when their enhanced bodies couldn't handle the drug modifications. A few became successful enhanced subjects who now worked for military and intelligence operations. The most terrifying discovery was in my own medical file. The drugs had caused irreversible genetic and neurological changes. My DNA had been permanently altered. My brain chemistry was completely dependent on continued drug treatments. Without regular doses, I would suffer organ failure and death within weeks. I was no longer completely human, and I could never go back. Dr. Chen found me reading the files an hour later. "I was wondering when you'd discover this," she said calmly, not seeming surprised at all. "Your enhanced cognitive abilities made it inevitable. You're much smarter than when you arrived." She explained that enhanced subjects couldn't survive without regular drug treatments. The compounds created permanent biological dependency. Stopping treatment meant certain death from withdrawal and organ failure. "You have two choices," she said. "Continue as a research subject with a comfortable life and meaningful work using your enhanced capabilities. Or attempt escape with the knowledge that withdrawal will kill you within a month." 3 of us chose to escape. Myself, Marcus, and Jennifer. Robert and the others decided to stay, accepting their new roles as enhanced research assets rather than face certain death. We planned our escape during the facility's weakest security period, when most staff were off duty. But we were already experiencing withdrawal symptoms from missing supplement doses, hallucinations, seizures, severe pain, organ stress. Our enhanced bodies were shutting down without the drugs. The escape through the Alaska wilderness was a nightmare. Marcus collapsed from seizures after 6 hours. Jennifer made it 12 hours before organ failure stopped her heart. I kept moving through pure determination and terror, following the river toward civilization while my enhanced body destroyed itself. I reached a small town 3 days later, half dead from withdrawal and exposure. The local hospital couldn't understand what was wrong with me until federal agents arrived and took control of my medical care. The Aurora Healing Center case was immediately classified as a national security matter. All investigation was suppressed. Evidence was sealed. The facility disappeared completely. When authorities finally checked the coordinates, they found empty wilderness with no sign any buildings had ever existed there. I spent 6 months in a classified medical facility, receiving experimental treatment to survive enhancement withdrawal. Doctors managed to stabilize my condition, but the permanent changes remained. I still have enhanced cognitive abilities, mixed with chronic health problems and psychological instability. The government gave me a new identity and relocated me to a different state for security reasons. Enhanced subjects who escape become permanent security risks because of what we know and what we can do. 5 years later, I still take daily medication to prevent organ failure. My brain processes information faster than normal humans, but I suffer constant headaches and memory problems. I'm stronger and healthier than most people my age, but my enhanced body requires careful medical monitoring to stay stable. I work as an office manager again, but everything feels different now. I can analyze workplace dynamics and solve problems in ways that seem impossible to my colleagues. Sometimes I catch myself knowing things I shouldn't be able to know, understanding situations beyond normal human intuition. I'm sharing this story to warn people about wellness retreats that seem too good to be true. If someone promises to transform your life completely, asks for large amounts of money up front, requires complete isolation from outside contact, or offers treatments that sound revolutionary and exclusive, run away immediately. Some healing programs aren't designed to heal you. They're designed to change you into something that was never meant to exist. And once that transformation begins, there's no going back to being completely human ever again. Trust me, I would know. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I've been a registered nurse for 8 years at Denver General Hospital. I work in the ER, so I've seen everything: car accidents, overdoses, heart attacks. I thought I could handle anything life threw at me. I'd been pulling double shifts for 5 years straight, saving every penny I could. My supervisor kept telling me to take a real vacation, not just those long weekends at my sister's place. So, I finally did it. I booked a professional wildlife photography tour in Alaska, 10 days with a real National Geographic photographer. It cost me $3,000, but I figured I deserved it. I had no idea I was paying for my own kidnapping. The company was called Alaska Wildlife Expeditions. Their website looked amazing: professional photos of grizzly bears and wolves, testimonials from happy customers, all the right insurance certifications. The reviews were perfect, 5 stars across the board, people raving about once-in-a-lifetime experiences, and portfolio quality shots. I spent weeks researching them. Everything checked out. I flew into Anchorage on a Tuesday morning in July. The weather was perfect, sunny, about 70 degrees. Our group met at the hotel lobby at 2 p.m., 6 of us total. There was Frank and Martha, a retired couple from Texas who'd been planning this trip for years. 2 college friends from California, Jake and Emma, both photography majors. And David, a quiet guy from Canada who traveled alone a lot. Everyone seemed normal, excited. We all had expensive camera gear and talked about the shots we wanted to get. Our guide was Rick Patterson, mid-40s, weathered face, confident handshake. He had the credentials, 20 years of wilderness photography, published in National Geographic, knew every animal behavior pattern in Alaska. He showed us his portfolio on a tablet. Incredible stuff. Close-ups of bears fishing, wolves hunting, eagles diving, exactly what we'd paid for. The first 3 days were perfect. Rick knew exactly where to find the wildlife. We got amazing shots of a grizzly family playing in a stream, wolves howling at dawn, a moose with massive antlers. Rick taught us about lighting, composition, timing. He was a real professional. We all felt like we were getting our money's worth. But on day 4, things started changing. Rick said we needed to go deeper into the wilderness for the really special shots, the kind tourists never see. He hired a helicopter to drop us off in a remote valley about 100 miles from any road. Beautiful place, but completely isolated. No cell service. Rick said that was perfect. No distractions from the modern world. The helicopter pilot seemed nervous when he dropped us off. Said he'd be back in 3 days to pick us up. Rick just nodded and waved him away. Said we didn't need babysitting. That's when Rick's personality started shifting. He became more demanding, pushed us to hike longer distances for better shots, made us get closer to dangerous animals than was safe. When Frank complained about the pace, Rick said real photographers had to be tough. Said we needed to commit if we wanted professional results. On day 5, our GPS units stopped working, all of them. Rick said it was normal in the mountains, too much magnetic interference. But something felt wrong. These were military-grade units. They shouldn't all fail at once. Rick just laughed and said we didn't need technology. He knew these mountains like his backyard. The hiking got brutal. Rick pushed us 18 hours a day, said the best wildlife activity happened during dawn and dusk, so we had to cover more ground. When Emma twisted her ankle on some loose rocks, Rick barely looked at it, told her to walk it off. As a nurse, I knew she needed rest and ice, but Rick said we couldn't waste time on minor injuries. The food started running low on day 6. Rick said we'd packed too much weight, had to ration what we had left. But I remembered loading plenty of supplies into his truck back in Anchorage. There should have been enough food for 10 days. Easy. When I questioned it, Rick got angry, said I was being unprofessional. That doubt and negativity would ruin the group dynamic. He started pitting us against each other. Told Frank his photos were amateur compared to Jake's work. Said Emma wasn't committed enough to be a real photographer. Made David compete with me for the best wildlife shots. The group unity we'd built in the first few days fell apart. Everyone became focused on pleasing Rick, proving we deserved to be there. By day 7, people were getting sick. The altitude, the exhaustion, the stress. Martha developed a bad cough. David was running a fever. But Rick refused to slow down. Said quitting wasn't an option. That we'd signed contracts, agreeing to complete the full tour no matter what. Legal and financial penalties if we backed out. I'd never seen a photography tour contract with language like that. But Rick kept our copies locked in his pack. Said they were important documents that needed protection from the weather. On day 8, Rick took our personal cameras. Said the group wasn't performing at professional levels, that we needed to earn back our equipment through improved dedication and performance. Without our cameras, we were completely dependent on him. He controlled everything: the food, the shelter, the way back to civilization. That night, Rick made it clear what he really wanted. Said female photographers had additional responsibilities on professional tours, that it was standard practice in the industry. Emma started crying. Martha looked terrified. I knew this wasn't about photography anymore. We were trapped. 100 miles from the nearest road, no communication equipment, no transportation. Rick had weapons, said they were for bear protection, but the way he handled them made it clear they were for us. If we tried to leave on our own, we'd die in the wilderness. Alaska doesn't forgive mistakes. On day 9, everything became clear. Rick got a call on a satellite phone he'd hidden from us. spoken code about 6 packages ready for pickup, and medical professional in the group. He was selling us, using the photography tour as cover for human trafficking. The perfect crime. Take tourists to a place where nobody would look for them, break them down psychologically, then ship them overseas. I realized my nursing skills made me valuable. Rick said there were medical facilities that needed discreet help, places that couldn't use traditional hiring. I'd be working there for a long time. The others had different destinies. Frank and Martha would be forced labor. Jake and Emma were young and attractive. The implications made me sick. David had computer skills Rick's organization could use, but my medical training also gave me an advantage. Rick's operation wasn't perfect. One of his associates had badly infected wounds from a fight with another trafficking group. Rick needed someone to treat him. He brought me to their camp, a hidden facility about 5 miles from where they were holding the others. The place was bigger than I expected. Portable buildings, solar power, communication equipment. This wasn't some amateur operation. They'd been doing this for years. I saw evidence of other photography tours, gear from dozens of different tourists. How many people had disappeared in these mountains? While treating the wounded man, I managed to send out an emergency medical alert using their satellite system. Made it look like I was ordering medical supplies. But the alert included our GPS coordinates and a distress code hospitals use for human trafficking situations. If anyone was monitoring emergency frequencies, they'd know what it meant. The next morning, Rick's people moved fast, said they were relocating the operation, started loading everyone into trucks for transport to an airstrip. This was it. Once we were on that plane, we'd disappear forever. But my alert had worked. As the trucks reached the main road, FBI tactical vehicles surrounded us. Turns out, the Bureau had been tracking Rick's organization for months. My emergency signal gave them the location they needed for the raid. The gunfight lasted about 10 minutes. Rick and 2 of his people were killed. The others surrendered when they realized they were outgunned. Frank didn't make it. He'd had a heart attack during the stress of captivity. But the rest of us survived. The investigation revealed that Alaska Wildlife Expeditions was a front for an international trafficking ring. They'd been operating for 3 years, targeting professionals with specific skills: nurses, doctors, engineers, teachers. People with money to afford expensive tours and abilities that made them valuable in forced labor markets. Rick wasn't even a real photographer. His National Geographic credits were fake. The reviews on their website were written by the organization. Even the insurance papers were fraudulent. They'd created an entire false identity to lure in victims. The recovery was brutal. 6 months of therapy to deal with the PTSD. Nightmares about being trapped in the wilderness. Panic attacks whenever I saw photography equipment. The hospital was supportive, but I couldn't go back to the ER. Too much stress, too many reminders of trauma. Now I work with the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. I help train law enforcement to recognize trafficking operations disguised as legitimate businesses. Tour companies, modeling agencies, overseas work programs, problems, they all use similar tactics. Professional-looking websites, fake testimonials, targeting people with specific skills or vulnerabilities. The photography tour industry has tightened security since our case broke. Better background checks for guides, verification of company credentials, check-in procedures for remote tours. But the traffickers adapt too. They find new ways to isolate victims, new covers for their operations. I still have a camera. Never used it after Alaska. Can't bring myself to look through a viewfinder without remembering Rick's voice telling us to get the perfect shot. Some experiences change you forever. Some vacations you never recover from. If you're planning an adventure tour anywhere in the world, do more than just check online reviews. Verify the company's physical address. Call their insurance provider directly. Make sure someone knows your exact itinerary and has contact information for local authorities. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Professional criminals are very good at looking legitimate. They count on people wanting to trust them, wanting to believe in the adventure they're selling. That trust can cost you everything. I learned that the hard way in the Alaska wilderness. Some photos aren't worth taking, some tours aren't worth surviving. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been fixing cars in Detroit for 12 years. Started right out of high school at my uncle's garage, worked my way up to head mechanic at Miller's Auto Service. I've crawled under everything from rusted-out Chevy trucks to brand-new BMWs, and I thought I'd seen it all. Oil changes, brake jobs, engine rebuilds, that was my world. But what happened last month at a remote lake in Alaska changed everything I thought I knew about taking a simple vacation. I'd been working non-stop for 8 years, 60-hour weeks, overtime every weekend, barely taking a day off. My buddy Jake kept telling me I needed a real break before I burned out completely. Jake worked construction, understood the grind. We'd been talking about a fishing trip for years, and finally decided to make it happen. Found this place online called Lon Lake, 40 miles from the nearest town, perfect for pike fishing, complete wilderness experience. The website looked professional. Clean cabin photos, testimonials from other fishermen, reasonable rates. The owner, some guy named Bill, said the lake was stocked with trophy-sized northern pike and hardly anyone knew about it. No cell towers, no internet, just pure nature. After years of car exhaust and city noise, it sounded perfect. We flew into Anchorage on a Tuesday morning in July. Rented a beat-up Ford pickup, reminded me of half the trucks I worked on back home. The first 4 hours of driving were normal highway, but then we turned onto logging roads that got rougher by the mile. My mechanic brain kept noting every pothole and loose rock. The truck handled it fine, but I was glad we'd gotten the insurance. When we finally reached Lon Lake, it looked exactly like the photos. Crystal clear water stretching maybe half a mile across, surrounded by thick pine forest. The cabin sat right on the shore with a wooden dock extending into the water. Bill had left everything just like he promised: propane, stove, basic supplies, even a small aluminum boat tied to the dock. The first 3 days were incredible, best fishing I'd ever experienced. We pulled pike out of that lake like they were waiting in line, some of them 2 feet long, thick as my arm. Jake caught one so big we could barely lift it for photos. Every cast seemed to bring in another fish. At night, we'd clean them on the dock, cook them over the fire pit, and just relax. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about carburetors or transmission problems. The loons were what really made it feel special. Every evening, they'd start calling across the water, this haunting, beautiful sound that echoed off the mountains. Jake said it was like nature's own concert. We'd sit by the fire, drinking beer, listening to those calls until we fell asleep. I was already planning to come back next year, but on the 4th day, something changed. The loon calls sounded wrong. Instead of that musical, flowing sound, they were harsher, more guttural. Jake laughed it off, said maybe we were hearing different types of birds, but it bothered me. When you work with engines all day, you develop an ear for when something's not running right. These calls had that same off-rhythm feeling. The fishing started getting weird too. Water temperature felt different in random spots. Some areas were warm, others ice cold, even though it was the same lake. The fish began avoiding places where they'd been biting like crazy the day before. My tackle box organization got messed up overnight, even though I always put everything back in its proper place. Old habits from keeping my toolbox organized. Our equipment started malfunctioning. Fishing line would snap for no reason. Good 20-pound test line that should have handled anything in that lake. Reels would jam up even though I'd checked and cleaned them before the trip. Lures disappeared without any fish activity on the line. As a mechanic, I know when equipment fails because of wear and when something else is wrong. This was something else. The weird part was hearing our own voices calling from across the lake. I'd be at the cabin and hear Jake yelling my name from the water, but Jake would be right next to me. Or Jake would hear me calling from the dock when I was inside organizing gear. The sound carried strangely across the water, like the acoustics were all wrong. At night, I started seeing large movements in the lake from the cabin window, much bigger than any fish, creating wakes on the surface but never fully surfacing. In the morning, I'd find wet footprints around the cabin that weren't ours. Large prints, but with webbing between what looked like toes. They'd lead from the water to our front door, then just disappear. Our fishing gear would be rearranged when we woke up. Rods lined up in perfect rows around the dock, tackle boxes organized in ways we'd never left them. Like someone had been sorting through everything while we slept. The boat dock started vibrating at night too. rhythmic movements like something big was moving underneath. Jake had brought a fish finder with thermal imaging, started showing heat signatures, moving deep in the lake, shapes way too big to be fish, moving in coordinated patterns like they were communicating. The depth readings were impossible, showing different depths in the same spot depending on when we checked. The lake began smelling different. Not fishy or like algae, but something organic and sweet that didn't belong. Reminded me of the time I had to clean out a car that had been flooded and sitting for weeks, that mixture of decay and something else you couldn't identify. Our boat would drift to specific locations, even when we anchored it properly. Always the same spots, like something was moving it there on purpose. I'd lose time while fishing, cast a line, and suddenly hours had passed with no memory of what happened in between. Jake experienced the same thing. On day 6 we saw it. Something massive broke the surface near the center of the lake. Not a fish, wrong shape, too large, moving with clear purpose. Jake saw it too. He described an elongated body, pale greenish skin, and what looked like multiple appendages moving independently. We found claw marks scraped deep into the wooden dock pilings afterward. Deep gouges in treated lumber that would have taken incredible strength to make. Despite the lake being crystal clear before, we suddenly couldn't see the bottom even in shallow areas. The depth seemed to shift, becoming impossibly deep right near the shore. The fake loon calls were joined by perfect mimicry of our voices. I'd hear Jake calling my name from the water, but Jake would be inside the cabin. While fishing, I felt our boat being lifted slightly from underneath. Something large was directly below us, supporting the boat's weight. I looked over the edge and saw it looking back, large, dark eyes that showed intelligence, not animal instinct. What I'd thought were limbs were actually tentacles or appendages. I counted at least 6, each moving independently. At night, I could hear rhythmic breathing sounds coming from the water, slow, deep inhalations that carried across the still lake. We found fish bones arranged in deliberate patterns along the shoreline the next morning. Clean bones, perfectly organized, like some kind of ritual display. Based on the movements and wakes, whatever was in there was at least 30 feet long. Large enough to easily overturn our boat or destroy the dock. But the strangest part was how it responded to our activities. When we'd fish in one area, it would move to intercept. It was learning our patterns, showing intelligence. The thermal finder revealed there might be more than one. Different heat signatures, coordinated movements, multiple sources of vocal mimicry. They were showing territorial behavior when we'd venture too far onto the lake. Warning behaviors that escalated over time. On our final day, the creature attempted direct contact. It gently rocked our boat while maintaining eye contact with me. Clearly intelligent and trying to communicate something. That's when I knew we needed to leave immediately. But Jake wanted one more night of fishing. That last evening, Jake decided to try night fishing from the dock, despite everything we'd experienced. Said he wanted one more good catch before we left in the morning. I was inside organizing our gear when I heard him talking to someone on the dock. Assumed he was somehow on his phone, even though we had no cell service. Jake's voice was animated, like he was having an interesting conversation with an old friend, but I couldn't hear anyone responding. The conversation went on for maybe 20 minutes. Jake asking questions, laughing, responding to things I couldn't hear. Then everything went silent. Complete silence. No more talking, no water sounds. Even the night insects stopped making noise. I went to check the dock and found Jake's fishing rod still set up exactly as he'd left it. Tackle box open, beer bottle still cold. But no sign of Jake anywhere. The water around the dock was disturbed, circular ripples spreading outward like something large had just submerged. I spent the whole night searching the shoreline with my flashlight, calling Jake's name. I kept hearing his voice answering from different directions on the lake, but I knew it was the mimicry. Dawn came with no sign of him. His gear remained exactly as he'd left it, but Jake was gone without any trace of struggle or accident. I packed everything in 10 minutes and drove straight to the authorities. Search and rescue teams combed that lake and shoreline for 3 days. Divers, helicopters, search dogs. They found nothing. No body, no evidence of an accident, no signs of struggle. The case remains open as an unexplained disappearance. The official report says Jake probably fell in while night fishing and drowned, his body carried away by underwater currents. But I know what really happened. That lake took him, and whatever's living in those depths is still there, waiting for the next group of fishermen who think they're just taking a peaceful vacation. I went back to fixing cars in Detroit. Haven't taken a day off since, haven't gone fishing either. Sometimes at night, when it's really quiet in the garage, I swear I can hear Jake's voice calling my name from somewhere far away. But I never answer back. If you're planning a fishing trip to some remote lake you found online, especially one that promises trophy fish and complete isolation, maybe consider staying closer to civilization. Some places are remote for a reason, and some things living in deep water are better left undisturbed. The website for Lon Lake is still active, still advertising the same perfect fishing experience, complete peace and quiet. But if you check the reviews carefully, you'll notice they're all from single fishermen. The guys who went with friends never seem to write reviews. I wonder how many of them made it home. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been a long-haul truck driver for 15 years. Started when I was 23, fresh out of the Army, looking for work that would let me see the country. Over the years, I've hauled everything from produce to construction equipment across all 48 states. But it was the ice roads of Alaska that paid the best. Dangerous winter routes across frozen lakes and tundra that most drivers wouldn't touch. I'd been running ice roads for 5 winters, had all the certifications, knew how to handle a big rig in temperatures that would kill you in minutes. But what happened on February 14, 2023, on the Dalton Highway extension, changed everything I thought I knew about surviving in the wilderness. Some things out there are colder than winter itself. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. Emergency medical supply run from Fairbanks to the Coldfoot mining camp. 300 miles of ice road through some of the most remote territory in North America. The pay was double my usual rate because of the urgency. The camp's medic had radioed in about a worker who'd been injured in a cave-in, needed surgery supplies that couldn't wait for the regular supply run next week. My truck was already winterized. Double insulated cab, Arctic-grade diesel, emergency survival kit, satellite radio, the works. I'd made this exact run dozens of times before. The weather forecast looked perfect. Clear skies, stable temperatures around -40, no storms predicted for the next 48 hours. The ice road conditions were rated excellent. Thick, solid ice that could handle trucks twice my weight. I loaded up the medical supplies, did my pre-trip inspection, and rolled out of Fairbanks at 6 a.m. The route would take me north on the Dalton Highway, then east across a series of frozen lakes and through the Brooks Range foothills. Remote as hell, but well-established trucking route with regular traffic and emergency stations every 50 miles. The first 150 miles went exactly as planned. My Peterbilt 379 was running smooth, engine temperature steady, all systems green. Made good time on the highway section, then turned onto the ice road proper just after noon. The satellite radio was working perfectly. Checked in with dispatch every hour, got confirmation from the mining camp that they were standing by for the delivery. Outside temperature was holding steady at -42, cold enough to kill you fast, but nothing unusual for February in Alaska. I'd been driving ice roads long enough to know the dangers. Equipment failure in this environment meant death unless you were prepared. That's why I carried redundant heating systems, emergency food for a week, Arctic sleeping bag rated to -60, signal flares, everything the safety manual required, and then some. Had a CB radio, satellite phone, and emergency beacon. 3 different ways to call for help if something went wrong. The mining camp was expecting me by 8 p.m., and barring any major problems, I'd be there with time to spare. Mile marker 180 is where everything started going wrong. I was making good time across Icewind Lake, a frozen stretch about 10 miles across, when my engine temperature gauge started acting up. The needle would jump from normal to red line, then back down, even though my coolant levels were fine and the engine sounded normal. Then my electrical system joined the party. Headlights dimming, radio crackling with static, dashboard lights flickering like a Christmas tree. I pulled over to check things out. That's when I noticed how cold it was getting inside the cab. I mean, really cold. My breath was fogging up heavy, ice crystals forming on the inside of the windshield even though the heater was running full blast. The outside temperature gauge was reading -68 degrees, which was impossible. I'd been watching it hold steady at -40 for hours. Weather, Doesn't change that fast, that dramatically. Something was wrong with my instruments. Except my thermometer wasn't broken. I could feel it in my bones. The cold was getting worse by the minute. The truck's heating system, designed to keep the cab comfortable in -50 weather, couldn't keep up. Ice was forming on the interior surfaces now, not just the windows. My coffee had a skin of ice on top. The steering wheel was so cold through my gloves that it burned to touch. Then the engine died. Just shut down completely, like someone had turned off a switch. All the electrical systems failed at the same time. Lights, radio, everything. Emergency power didn't kick in. In 15 years of driving, through every kind of weather you can imagine, I'd never seen a total system failure like that. Modern trucks are built with redundancies, backup systems, fail-safes. This shouldn't have been possible. I tried the emergency procedures I'd been trained for, checked the engine, compartment, everything looked normal, no obvious problems. Tried the manual start procedures, checked all the fuses, followed the troubleshooting guide step by step. Nothing worked. The cold was so intense now that my tools were becoming brittle. Metal parts that should have been flexible were snapping when I touched them. This wasn't normal Arctic weather. This was something else entirely. My emergency survival gear was in the sleeper compartment. Arctic sleeping bag, chemical heat packs, emergency food, flares. I activated everything at once, trying to create a warm zone I could survive in until help arrived. Dispatch would start looking for me when I missed my next radio check-in in 2 hours. The mining camp would send out a search party if I didn't show up on schedule. I just had to stay alive until then. But the chemical heat packs froze solid. I'm not kidding. Military-grade chemical heaters, designed to work in -40 temperatures, just stopped producing heat and turned into blocks of ice. My emergency sleeping bag, rated for extreme Arctic conditions, felt like I was wrapping myself in frozen canvas. The cold was penetrating everything, like it was actively hunting for sources of heat and destroying them. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with weather anymore. Weather doesn't target specific things. Weather doesn't have intelligence. But something was out there in the blowing snow, and it was systematically taking apart my survival systems piece by piece. I could feel it watching me, waiting for me to run out of options. I saw it for the first time when I tried to use my flares. Struck one, held it up to the window, hoping someone might see the light. The flare lit normally, burned bright red for about 10 seconds, then went out like someone had dropped it in water. But in those 10 seconds of light, I saw something moving in the snowstorm outside. Tall, thin, pale as the snow itself. It looked almost human, but wrong. Too tall, limbs too long. Moving in a way that hurt to watch. The thing circled my truck slowly, staying just at the edge of visibility in the blowing snow. Every time it got closer, the temperature dropped further. Ice was forming on every surface now, including my skin. My breath was coming out as solid crystals that fell to the floor like hail. The cold was inside me, in my lungs, in my blood. I was dying by degrees, and whatever was outside knew it. I tried to start the engine one more time, following every procedure in the manual. Nothing. Tried the radio, the satellite phone, the emergency beacon. All dead. The cold had killed every electrical system in the truck. I was completely cut off from help, trapped in a metal box that was becoming my freezer. The entity, because that's what it was, not human, not animal, began pressing against the truck. I could feel the metal contracting, hear the frame groaning as temperatures dropped beyond anything steel was designed to handle. Ice was forming on the interior walls now, thick sheets of it that cracked and shifted as the truck settled. My tools had become so brittle they shattered when I touched them. Through the ice-covered windshield, I could see its eyes. Pale blue, like glacier ice in sunlight, but with an intelligence that was ancient and hungry. This thing had been here long before the ice roads, before the truckers, maybe before humans altogether. It fed on warmth, on life, and I was just another meal that had wandered into its territory. My hands were going numb despite my insulated gloves. My feet felt like blocks of ice in my boots. Early hypothermia was setting in. Confusion, drowsiness, loss of coordination. I knew the stages because they drilled them into us in safety training. Stage 1 was shivering and discomfort. Stage 2 was mental confusion and poor decision-making. Stage 3 was unconsciousness and death. I was solidly in stage 2 and sliding fast towards stage 3. The entity pressed its face against the driver's side window. Up close, I could see it wasn't made of flesh and blood like us. It was ice and snow given form, ancient winter given malevolent purpose. Its mouth opened, and I saw not teeth, but icicles, sharp and deadly. It was smiling at me, enjoying my slow death. That's when it touched the truck directly. The moment its hand made contact with the metal, ice shot through the cab like lightning. Every surface became coated in thick frost instantly. The air itself seemed to freeze. My next breath felt like inhaling broken glass. The cold wasn't just around me anymore, it was in me, pulling the heat from my body faster than my metabolism could replace it. I felt my life force being drained away, pulled out through my skin like the thing was a living vacuum. My vision started to tunnel, consciousness fading as my brain shut down non-essential functions to preserve core temperature. The last thing I remember clearly was those pale blue eyes staring at me through the windshield, patient and satisfied. I died in that truck on February 14, 2023, at mile marker 180 on the Lon Lake ice road. Froze to death while something ancient and hungry fed on my life energy. The search and rescue team found my truck 3 days later when I failed to arrive at the mining camp. My body was perfectly preserved by the extreme cold, like I'd only been dead for hours instead of days. The official report listed equipment failure as the cause of death, mechanical breakdown leading to exposure in extreme weather. The investigators couldn't explain why all my systems had failed simultaneously, or why the truck showed signs of structural damage from cold beyond anything in the weather records. They dismissed the ice formations inside the cab as normal atmospheric conditions. But other ice road drivers know better. There have been reports from that same stretch of road ever since: sudden equipment failures, impossible cold snaps, trucks found abandoned with drivers missing. The entity is still there, still hunting, still feeding on anyone unlucky enough to break down in its territory. The ice roads are dangerous enough without supernatural predators. But now I know that some of the deaths blamed on weather and equipment failure are something much worse. That thing is still out there, waiting in the snow, patient as winter itself. And every truck that breaks down at mile marker 180 is just another meal. My advice to any driver running the Alaska ice roads: carry extra heat sources, keep your equipment maintained, and if your truck breaks down anywhere near Lon Lake, don't wait for rescue. Start walking immediately, no matter how cold it gets. Because staying in one place too long means you'll end up like me, perfectly preserved, forever frozen, another victim of something that's been hunting these roads since before humans ever thought to cross them. The ice never forgets, and it's always hungry. My name is David Martinez, and until 3 months ago, I was a bank teller at First National Bank in Columbus, Ohio. I'm telling this story from a psychiatric ward in Anchorage, Alaska, where they're keeping me for evaluation and observation. The doctors think I'm having a psychotic break. My family thinks the isolation got to me. The police think I murdered 4 people. But I know the truth about what happened to those missing tourists in Coldfoot, Alaska, and why the Aurora Borealis isn't what anyone thinks it is. I'd been working at the bank for 8 years, processing the same deposits and loan applications every day, watching other people's money flow through my window while I scraped together $27 in my checking account. The only thing that kept me sane was photography, specifically my obsession with capturing the northern lights. I'd spent every weekend for 3 years driving to dark sky locations around Ohio, photographing meteor showers and star trails with secondhand equipment I couldn't afford. My mother called it David's expensive hobby. My ex-girlfriend Sarah called it another excuse to avoid real life. She left me last Christmas after I spent our vacation fund on a camera lens. "You care more about those stupid lights than you do about us," she'd screamed before slamming the door. She wasn't wrong. For 2 years after Sarah left, I lived on ramen noodles and worked double shifts, saving every penny for one dream trip: photographing the Aurora Borealis in Alaska. Not just any Aurora photos, but portfolio-quality images that could launch a freelance career and get me out of that fluorescent-lit bank prison forever. I researched Aurora photography like my life depended on it. studied weather patterns, solar activity, and magnetic field data. I chose Coldfoot, Alaska, population 10, located 60 miles north of the Arctic Circle with zero light pollution. Perfect for aurora viewing, but also the most isolated place I'd ever been. The $3,000 investment in specialized equipment represented 6 months of overtime pay. A Canon EOS R5 with a 1.424mm f/2.8 lens rated for extreme cold, a carbon fiber tripod, and an intervalometer for time-lapse sequences. The gear bag was worth more than my car. Coldfoot Creek Lodge was a collection of weathered cabins that catered to aurora photographers and extreme tourists. The owner, Jim Kowalski, was a gruff former meteorologist who'd moved to Alaska after his wife died in a car accident downstate. He'd converted his grief into an obsession with weather patterns and aurora forecasting. "You picked good timing," Jim said when I arrived, his breath visible in the -15 air. "Solar activity's been perfect this week. Just had 4 other photographers check out yesterday. German tourists who got some incredible shots before they headed home." My cabin was sparse but functional. A wood stove, thick blackout curtains, heating systems designed for photographers who needed to sleep during daylight and work all night. Jim provided topographic maps marked with the best viewing locations and warned me about the dangers of aurora photography alone. "Temperature drops to -30 out there," he said, tapping the map. "Hypothermia kills faster than bears. Always tell me where you're going and carry the emergency radio." The first 3 nights were everything I'd dreamed. The aurora displays were magnificent. Cascading green curtains that danced across star-filled skies, ribbons of light that moved like living creatures breathing across the atmosphere. My camera captured images better than anything I'd seen in National Geographic. Perfect exposures, crisp details, colors so vivid they seemed artificial. But I wanted more. I wanted the shot that would change my life. On the 4th night, I hiked further from the lodge than Jim recommended, following a frozen creek bed to a clearing he'd marked as advanced photographers only. The isolation was complete. No light pollution, no sounds except wind through bare trees, and the occasional crack of ice expanding in the cold. I set up my equipment with practiced efficiency, my fingers numb inside winter gloves as I adjusted camera settings in the darkness. The aurora forecast predicted moderate activity, but I was hoping for something spectacular. That's when I noticed the other photographer. About 100 yards away, barely visible in the starlight, someone else was photographing the aurora. Another tripod, another figure hunched behind a camera. I felt a flash of annoyance. I'd hiked out here specifically to avoid other photographers. I walked over to introduce myself, my boots crunching through knee-deep snow. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. The figure wasn't moving at all, not adjusting settings, not changing position, just standing perfectly still behind the camera. "Hey," I called out, "how's the shooting going?" No response. The figure didn't even turn around. 20 feet away, I could see it was a woman in a red winter jacket, blonde hair visible under her hat. Her camera was pointed at the sky, but she wasn't looking through the viewfinder. She was just standing there, motionless, staring straight ahead. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I reached out and touched her shoulder. She felt solid but cold, colder than the ambient temperature. When I walked around to see her face, my breath caught in my throat. Her eyes were open but completely white. No pupils, no iris, just milk-white eyes staring at nothing. Her skin was pale blue, and frost had formed on her eyelashes and lips. She'd been dead for hours, maybe days. But she was still standing upright, still holding her camera position. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. Hypothermia could kill quickly in these temperatures, but people don't freeze standing up. They collapse, curl, up, seek shelter. They don't die at their tripods like statues. That's when I noticed the aurora acting strange. Instead of flowing naturally across the sky, the lights were forming geometric patterns. Perfect triangles, symmetrical spirals, organized grids that moved with mechanical precision. Natural aurora don't behave that way. They follow magnetic field lines and solar wind patterns, not mathematical formulas. My camera started malfunctioning. The LCD display showed images that didn't match what I was seeing through the viewfinder. Photos captured additional lights, strange symbols, and the dead woman's camera displaying impossible readings, exposure times of -seconds, ISO settings in the millions. I checked my camera's timestamp, 11:47 p.m., but my watch showed 2:15 a.m. According to my camera's internal clock, I'd lost nearly 3 hours of memory. Time itself seemed distorted around the Aurora. The dead woman's camera started clicking. Automatic. Shots. One every few seconds. Even though her fingers weren't touching any controls. The camera was operating itself, taking photographs of aurora patterns that weren't visible to my naked eyes. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to grab my equipment and get back to the lodge immediately. But I'm a photographer, and what I was witnessing was impossible. I had to document it. I started photographing the dead woman, the aurora, and the impossible readings on both our cameras. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The woman's camera bag had luggage tags, Greta Hoffmann, Munich, Germany. She was one of the 4 German tourists who checked out yesterday. According to Jim, they'd left for home. But here was Greta, frozen dead at her tripod, taking photographs with an automated camera. The Aurora began responding to my flash. Each time I triggered a test shot, the lights would immediately shift patterns, as if they were aware of my photography. I tested this repeatedly. Flash, pattern change, flash, different pattern change. The Aurora was somehow conscious. My hands were shaking, and not just from the cold. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Greta must have gotten lost, separated from her group, died of exposure. The Aurora patterns were just coincidence. The camera malfunction was just equipment failure in extreme cold. But then I heard voices, German voices, speaking softly in the darkness beyond the tree line. 3 distinct voices having a conversation I couldn't understand, but their tone was casual, friendly, like tourists discussing photography techniques. Greta? Sind Sie hier draußen? A man's voice, calling for Greta. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the beam toward the voices. 3 figures stood among the trees, about 50 feet away. 2 men and another woman, all wearing heavy winter photography gear, all standing perfectly still. "Hello," I shouted. "Do you need help? Your friend Greta is here." They turned toward my light in perfect unison, mechanical movements like marionettes on strings. In the flashlight beam, I could see their faces, pale blue skin, frost on their features, and those same milk-white eyes. All 4 German tourists were dead, standing at attention in the forest, continuing their aurora photography session even after hypothermia had claimed their lives. The aurora intensified, casting everything in eerie green light. In that supernatural illumination, I could see their camera equipment was still operational. 4 sets of tripods and cameras, all taking automated photographs of aurora patterns that defied physics. That's when I realized the aurora wasn't just responding to photography, it was controlling the photographers. The dead Germans began walking toward me in perfect formation, their movements stiff and unnatural. Their cameras clicked continuously as they approached, documenting every step of whatever was happening to me. I ran. Snow grabbed at my boots as I crashed through the forest, my own camera equipment bouncing against my back. Behind me, I could hear the mechanical clicking of 4 cameras following my retreat, and German voices speaking in that casual, friendly tone about photography and aurora patterns. I made it back to my equipment setup and grabbed my gear with fumbling, panic-stricken hands. The aurora display had intensified into something that hurt to look at directly. Not flowing atmospheric lights, but geometric structures that extended far beyond the visible atmosphere. My camera captured images that shouldn't be photographically possible. Aurora formations in deep space, mathematical patterns carved across the stellar background, and geometric symbols that looked like language or scientific formulas. Then my camera started operating independently. Automatic focus adjustments, exposure changes, and timing sequences occurred without manual input. The Aurora was taking control of my equipment just like it had controlled the dead Germans. But I wasn't dead yet. I ejected the memory card from my camera and shoved it into my jacket pocket, then grabbed my emergency radio and started running toward the lodge. Behind me, aurora light intensified until it was bright as daylight, and I could hear footsteps in the snow, 4 sets of boots following me home. The radio crackled with static, then Jim's voice. "David, you copy? Been trying to reach you for hours. Your scheduled check-in was midnight." "Jim," I gasped, still running. "The German tourists, they're still here. They're dead, but they're still here." What? David, calm down. The Germans left yesterday morning. I watched them drive away myself. No, they're in the forest, all 4 of them. They're dead, but they're still taking pictures. Long pause. Then, David, get back to the lodge immediately. Something's wrong. I made it back to find Jim, waiting on the porch with a shotgun across his lap and a grim expression. Inside the lodge, he poured coffee with hands that shook slightly. Tell me exactly what you saw out there, he said. I described everything. The dead woman at the tripod, the impossible Aurora patterns, the automated cameras, the walking corpses with white eyes. Jim listened without interruption, his face growing paler with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder filled with photographs. These were taken by the Germans before they left, he said. The photographs showed normal Aurora displays, but in several images, I could see additional figures in the background. Shadowy shapes standing among the trees, too distant to make out clearly, but definitely human forms watching the photography session. There's something else, Jim said. The Germans didn't check out yesterday morning. Their room was empty, but their luggage was still there. Their rental car was still in the parking lot. I reported them missing to the state troopers, but the weather's been too bad for search and rescue. I showed him the images on my camera's LCD, the impossible Aurora patterns, the dead woman, the automated equipment. Jim studied each photo carefully, his expression growing more troubled. I've seen this before, he said finally. Photographers who go out alone during peak Aurora activity, they come back different, or they don't come back at all. He pulled out a logbook filled with guest records dating back 15 years. Red X marks appeared throughout the entries, photographers who disappeared during Aurora sessions. Dozens of them over the years. The Aurora up here isn't like Aurora anywhere else, Jim said. There's something in those lights that calls to photographers specifically. It wants to be documented, but the documentation process changes people. I thought about my equipment operating independently, my camera taking photographs of patterns I couldn't see. Changes them how? They become part of it. Living documentation systems. The Aurora preserves them in a state where they can continue photographing forever. Outside, we heard the sound of camera shutters clicking in the darkness. 4 distinct cameras operating in sequence, growing closer to the lodge. Jim loaded his shotgun. They'll try to bring you back out there. The Aurora needs more photographers, more documentation. It's been collecting them for years. The front door rattled as something tried the handle. David? A woman's voice, speaking English with a German accent. David, come out. The Aurora is beautiful tonight, perfect for photography. More voices joined in. 3 men speaking in accented English, all friendly and encouraging, inviting me to return to the forest for better shooting conditions. Don't listen, Jim whispered. Don't even look at them. But I had to know. I crept to the window and peered through the curtains. 4 figures stood in the lodge's front yard, perfectly spaced like compass points. Greta and her 3 companions, all holding their cameras, all taking continuous photographs of the lodge. Their milk-white eyes reflected Aurora light, and frost covered their blue-tinged skin. David, one of the men called out, your camera is taking wonderful pictures. Come see what you've captured. I looked at my camera's LCD screen. Even though it was inside the lodge, the camera was still operating automatically, still taking photographs. The images showed the interior of the lodge, but also showed additional figures I couldn't see with my naked eyes, shadowy forms standing throughout the room. Dozens of them. Other photographers from other years, all continuing their documentation duties, all invisible unless captured by Aurora-enhanced equipment. There are more of them, I whispered to Jim. They're already inside. Jim looked at his own camera equipment, an old film SLR he used for weather documentation. Through the viewfinder, he could see them too. Photographers from decades past, all standing at attention, all taking pictures of the living humans they were slowly converting to their ranks. The Aurora intensified outside until green light flooded through every window. In that supernatural illumination, I could see the truth. The lodge itself was full of missing photographers. Dozens of them. From every year, Jim had operated the business. They stood motionless throughout the rooms, cameras ready, documenting everything for the Aurora's vast collection of human observation data. Jim, I said, "How long have you really been running this lodge?" He looked at me with eyes that were beginning to show flecks of white. "I don't remember anymore, David. The Aurora makes it hard to keep track of time." I realized the horrible truth. Jim wasn't just the lodge owner, he was the bait. The Aurora had been using him for years to lure photographers to this location, promising perfect viewing conditions and isolated shooting opportunities. My camera's flash fired automatically, illuminating the room. In that brief strobe of light, I could see everyone clearly. Jim, Greta, the 3 German men, and dozens of other photographers spanning decades of missing persons reports. All of them standing perfectly still. All of them watching me. All of them waiting for me to join their eternal photography session. I grabbed my memory card and ran for the back door, but it wouldn't open. The Aurora light was so intense now that it was burning my retinas, and I could feel my equipment bag getting heavier as more cameras materialized inside it. The Aurora was adding me to its collection. I smashed through a window and ran into the forest. But there was nowhere to go. The Aurora display covered the entire sky, extending in every direction. And everywhere I looked, I could see photographers standing among the trees. Decades of missing tourists, all continuing their work, all documenting the Aurora's expansion across Alaska. I made it 3 miles before hypothermia began setting in. My hands were too numb to operate my camera, but the camera kept working anyway, taking photographs of my own freezing process for the Aurora's archives. That's when the search and rescue helicopter found me. The state troopers said I'd been missing for 6 days, not 1 night. They found me unconscious in a snowbank, 12 miles from Coldfoot, suffering from severe hypothermia and delirium. My camera equipment was scattered around me, all of it damaged beyond repair by exposure to extreme cold. They never found the German tourists. They never found any evidence of the lodge I described. According to official records, Coldfoot Creek Lodge burned down in 1987, and Jim Kowalski died in that fire. The doctors say I suffered hallucinations from hypothermia and isolation. The police think I killed 4 German tourists and hid their bodies. My memory card contained only corrupted data and blurred images that could be explained by equipment malfunction. But I know what I saw. I know what's happening to photographers in Alaska. The Aurora Borealis isn't an atmospheric phenomenon. It's a collection system operated by something that needs human observers to document its expansion. Every year, it claims more photographers, adding them to its network of living cameras, building a vast archive of human perception data. And sometimes, on clear nights here in the psychiatric ward, I can see Aurora light reflecting off the hospital windows. When that happens, my hands start moving automatically, framing shots with an imaginary camera, taking photographs for a collection I'm still part of. The doctors think these are compulsive behaviors related to my trauma. But I know the truth. Once you've been selected by the Aurora, you never stop being a photographer. You just change perspective. And every night, I can hear cameras clicking in the darkness outside my window, documenting everything, waiting for me to join them again. The missing tourists aren't missing. They're still working. And so am I. My name is Mike Torres, and I need to tell you what really happened to the missing families in the Kenai Peninsula. I've been a construction worker in Phoenix for 16 years, built everything from strip malls to luxury homes. I've seen accidents that would make most people sick, worked through desert heat that kills unprepared tourists. But I was completely unprepared for what my family and I became during our vacation to Alaska last July. The media calls them missing tourist cases. 14 families over the past 3 years. The Alaska State Troopers blame bear attacks, drowning accidents, people getting lost in the wilderness. They're wrong. Those families didn't get lost. They found something much worse. Sarah found the cabin online, Whispering Pines, listed on every major vacation rental site. The reviews were perfect. Magical family experience. Peaceful retreat from city life. Best vacation we've ever had. What the reviews didn't mention was that none of those families ever made it home. The photos looked incredible. Log cabin overlooking a pristine lake, mountains reflected in still water, a dock perfect for fishing with kids. Emma, our 8-year-old, saw the pictures and immediately started packing her fishing pole. After months of 14-hour days trying to finish a shopping center project, the idea of a week without phone calls and permit delays sounded like paradise. The drive from Anchorage took 6 hours through some of Alaska's most remote territory. Cell service disappeared after the first hour. Emma pressed her face to the window, pointing out eagles and asking about bears. Sarah smiled more during that drive than she had in months. The stress of my job had been crushing our marriage. We needed this. Bill Kowalski met us at the cabin to hand over the keys. 70-ish, friendly enough, helped carry our bags inside. The place was exactly like the photos. Rustic but comfortable, fully stocked kitchen, stone fireplace, propane generator for power. "Beautiful spot," I said, shaking his weathered hand. "That it is," he replied. But something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. "Just remember to stay close to the cabin after dark. Wildlife gets active at night. Bears, wolves, sometimes other things." I assumed he meant the usual tourist warnings. He climbed into his truck and drove off, leaving us to our family time. The first 3 days were perfect. Emma caught her first fish, a small trout that fought like it was 5 times bigger. Sarah spent hours reading on the dock, completely relaxed for the first time in months. I slept past sunrise without my phone buzzing with work emergencies. But on the 4th morning, I woke up starving. Not normal hungry, starving like I hadn't eaten in days. Sarah and Emma felt it too. We demolished our breakfast supplies, eggs, bacon, pancakes, fruit, but the gnawing sensation in our stomachs only got worse. "Maybe it's the mountain air," Sarah said, but her voice carried doubt. She was making her 4th sandwich of the morning. By noon, we'd eaten enough food for 3 days. By evening, our week's worth of groceries was nearly gone. The hunger was constant, painful, like our bodies were consuming themselves from the inside. That night, Emma crawled into our bed around 2 a.m. "Bad dreams again," she whispered, pressing against Sarah. "What about, sweetheart?" I was hunting something in the woods, something big, and I was so hungry I could taste blood in my mouth. Sarah and I looked at each other over Emma's head. We'd all been having similar dreams. Vivid, detailed dreams about tracking prey through the forest, about the taste and smell of fresh meat. I'd wake up with my mouth watering and a sick feeling in my stomach. The 5th day, I noticed the physical changes. My work clothes hung loose despite constant eating. Sarah's face looked gaunt, her cheekbones sharp. Even Emma seemed smaller. Somehow, like something was burning through our body mass faster than we could replace it. When I tried to start our SUV to drive to the store we'd passed on the way in, nothing happened. The battery was completely dead, which made no sense. I'd driven it yesterday. The electrical system showed no signs of normal wear or corrosion. It was like something had drained every amp of power overnight. Without the car, we were trapped. The nearest neighbor was 15 miles away, and Bill wasn't scheduled to return until the end of the week. That evening, the forest went silent. I'd been noticing normal wildlife sounds since we arrived: birds calling, squirrels chattering, insects buzzing around the lake. But suddenly, complete silence, not even wind through the trees. The quiet felt heavy, oppressive, like the entire wilderness was holding its breath. Emma stopped using silverware that night. She tore at her food with her hands, making small growling sounds while she ate. When Sarah tried to correct her, Emma looked back with an expression I'd never seen before: feral, predatory. "Emma, use your fork," I said firmly. She stared at me for a long moment with eyes that seemed too bright, too aware. Then she slowly picked up her fork, but her movements looked forced, like she was fighting against instincts that wanted something else entirely. The 6th day, we started moving as a pack. Instead of wandering the cabin independently, we stayed close together. We communicated less with words and more with glances and gestures. It felt natural, efficient. Sarah began hoarding food in hidden caches around the cabin. When I found crackers stuffed under our mattress, she got aggressive. "We need them," she snarled, then caught herself. We might need them later." But her initial reaction, the snarl, the territorial posture, that was her real response. The human words came after, like an afterthought. I found myself awake all night, prowling the cabin instead of sleeping. My senses had sharpened dramatically. I could hear heartbeats from across the room, distinguish individual scents in the air, see clearly in near total darkness. During the day, my thoughts turned increasingly primitive. When I looked at Emma and Sarah, part of my mind saw pack members. When I thought about the wildlife that had fled the area, I felt frustrated that our territory had been abandoned by potential prey. The construction worker, part of my brain recognized these thoughts as wrong, dangerous, but they felt right in ways that civilized thinking never had. On the seventh morning, Emma made an announcement that chilled me to the bone. "I can hear them calling," she said calmly, looking toward the forest. "The others, they want us to come hunting." "Others?" Sarah asked, though something in her expression suggested she already knew. "The families that came before us," Emma said with the matter-of-fact tone children use for obvious things. "They're waiting in the woods. They've been waiting for us to be ready." That's when I found the hidden books. Searching the cabin more thoroughly, I discovered a locked closet behind the wood stove. Inside were dozens of personal items: wallets, driver's licenses, children's toys, camera equipment, all belonging to families who'd rented this cabin over the past 3 years. The Henderson family from Seattle, the Kowalski family from Denver, the Chen family from San Francisco, 14 different families, all supposedly missing in wilderness accidents. Along with the personal effects were books about local folklore, specifically about Wendigo legends. According to the research, Wendigo were humans transformed by consuming human flesh during periods of starvation. They became perpetually hungry creatures that could never satisfy their appetite for human meat. One book contained a detailed map of Wendigo activity in Alaska. Our lake was marked as the center of the largest cluster of sightings in North America, dating back over a century. But the most disturbing discovery was a journal, apparently written by Bill Kowalski himself. Asterisk. The cabin works perfectly. Families arrive isolated, hungry, ready for transformation. The location does most of the work, something in the soil, the water, maybe the mountain itself. They change within a week. By the time I return for checkout, they're ready to join the others in the forest. Asterisk, asterisk. Tourism board thinks I'm a model cabin owner. Perfect safety record, no complaints. They don't know that my guests never actually leave. Asterisk. The journal contained detailed notes about each family's transformation, including ours. Asterisk. Torres family, day 5. Physical changes accelerating. Father showing pack leadership. Mother entering territorial phase. Child adapting fastest, as usual. Should be ready for harvest by day 8. Asterisk. Harvest, not rescue. Harvest. I showed the journal to Sarah and Emma. Instead of horror, I saw recognition in their eyes. "He's coming tomorrow," Sarah said, reading the schedule. "For checkout." Emma smiled, and I saw that her teeth had grown sharper, more pointed. "Good. I'm so hungry." The human part of my mind screamed that this was wrong, that I needed to fight what we were becoming. But that voice was growing quieter each hour. The Wendigo consciousness was stronger, more confident, more in control. When we heard Bill's truck the next afternoon, we were waiting. The 3 of us had positioned ourselves around the cabin with predatory precision. Sarah by the front door, Emma at the side window, me behind the storage shed. We communicated through subtle sounds and gestures, coordinated like wolves surrounding prey. Bill knocked twice, then used his spare key to enter. "Hello, Torres family? How's everything?" We took him together. The human Bill screamed for maybe 30 seconds. After that, there was only feeding. The hunger that had been gnawing at us for days found perfect satisfaction. Human flesh tasted exactly right in ways no other food ever had. The feeding completed our transformation, burning away the last vestiges of civilization from our minds. But Bill wasn't just our first kill. He was our recruitment officer. As we fed, his memories became ours. We understood the full scope of the operation. Bill had been doing this for decades, luring families to the cabin where the location itself triggered their transformation into Wendigo. The families didn't disappear. They joined the growing pack that lived in the forest around the lake. Over 40 Wendigo now called this area home, all former tourists who'd been transformed by the cabin's influence. They survived by hunting the steady stream of new victims that Bill's rental business provided. We were the newest additions to a pack that had been growing for generations. The afternoon after we killed Bill, the others came to welcome us. They emerged from the forest as the sun set. Men, women, children who'd once been ordinary families on vacation. Now they moved with predatory grace, their bodies elongated and adapted for hunting. Their eyes reflected light like animals, and their smiles revealed rows of sharp teeth. The Henderson family introduced themselves first. They'd been transformed 2 years ago, had taken 17 victims since then. Their daughter, once about Emma's age, had become their most effective hunter. "Children adapt fastest," Mrs. Henderson explained, her voice carrying only traces of her former humanity, less to unlearn. Emma fit in immediately. Within hours, she was running through the trees with the other Wendigo children, learning advanced hunting techniques and pack coordination. Sarah embraced our new nature completely. The stress and anxiety that had defined her human life disappeared, replaced by the simple clarity of predator instincts. I fought the transformation longer than my family, clinging to memories of my construction business, my human responsibilities. But the Wendigo pack was patient. They knew the human consciousness always surrendered eventually. By winter, I'd stopped thinking about Phoenix, about my crew, about permit deadlines and building codes. The complexity of civilized life felt like something that had happened to someone else. We learned the hunting patterns that had been perfected over decades. Bill's rental business continued operating. The pack had members who could pass for human when necessary, handling bookings and maintaining the cabin between victims. New families arrived every few weeks, drawn by the same appealing photos and reasonable prices that had attracted us. The isolation that made the location perfect for family bonding made it perfect for transformation and hunting. We only took families that wouldn't be immediately missed, people on extended vacations, families estranged from relatives, tourists with vague travel plans. The disappearances were spaced out across different seasons, different years, different victim profiles. The Alaska State Troopers investigated each disappearance individually, never recognizing the pattern. Bear attacks, drowning accidents, people getting lost in the wilderness, all perfectly reasonable explanations for tourist deaths in remote Alaska. Some families resisted the transformation longer than others. The Chen family from San Francisco held out for nearly 2 weeks, fighting the change with medication they'd brought for their diabetic son. But the cabin's influence was patient and persistent. Eventually, hunger conquered everything else. The most disturbing aspect wasn't the killing. It was how natural it felt. Hunting families who came to the cabin felt like harvesting crops that had grown themselves. They arrived isolated, vulnerable, trusting. They transformed according to biological imperatives older than civilization. We simply guided the process and collected the results. Emma, now in her second year as a Wendigo, could track a family's emotional state by scent alone. She knew exactly when they'd reached the point of no return, when their human consciousness had surrendered to Wendigo instincts. Sarah had become our pack's specialist in disposal and evidence elimination. Her human experience with insurance paperwork translated perfectly to creating documentation that explained tourist disappearances. I coordinated hunting strategies, using my construction background to understand how to modify the cabin for optimal transformation conditions. Certain materials in the walls seemed to accelerate the change. Specific room layouts increased territorial behavior. This summer, we've processed 6 families so far. Each transformation confirms what we've learned about human psychology. People will rationalize almost anything to avoid acknowledging that they're becoming monsters. They'll blame altitude, stress, diet, weather, anything except the obvious truth that they're changing into something that hunts other humans for food. The families that resist longest are always the ones with strong religious faith or deep family bonds. But eventually, biology defeats psychology, hunger defeats love, survival defeats morality. Next month, 3 more families have reservations at Whispering Pines. A retired couple from Minnesota, a single mother with twin daughters from Oregon, and a family of 5 from Texas celebrating their youngest child's high school graduation. The photos online still show the same beautiful lake, the same peaceful cabin, the same mountain views that attracted my family. The reviews continue praising the life-changing experience families have at the property. They're not lying. The experience definitely changes your life. But they don't mention that you won't be human when it's over, or that you won't want to be. The hunger is everything now. Planning the next hunt, coordinating with the pack, processing new arrivals who think they're on vacation until it's too late to matter. Sometimes I remember fragments of my human life. The weight of a hammer in my hand, The satisfaction of completing a job on schedule, the way Sarah used to laugh at my terrible construction jokes. But those memories feel like something I read in a book about someone else's life. Emma asked me yesterday what Phoenix was like. I tried to describe desert heat, city traffic, my construction crew, but the words felt meaningless. How do you explain human concepts to something that's moved beyond humanity? The truest thing I can tell you is this. When the Alaska State Troopers investigate our family's disappearance, they'll find the same evidence they found for all the others. Abandoned rental car, personal belongings left in the cabin, signs of a family that simply walked into the wilderness and never came back. They'll add us to their list of missing tourist cases. They'll file reports about probable bear attacks or drowning accidents. They'll close our case after a reasonable investigation period. They'll never find our bodies because we're still using them. And next tourist season, when new families see those beautiful photos of Whispering Pines cabin and decide to book their own perfect Alaskan vacation, we'll be waiting in the forest to welcome them home. The pack is always hungry. And tourists taste exactly like family.